The Secret School of Wisdom, Illuminati Rituals Revealed. Chapter 1. The Novice Degree. The path into the order begins with the condition of the novice, the first step by which a seeker is tested in both intention and perseverance. The ritual of the novice is framed not only as an introduction to the mysteries of the Illuminati, but also as a probationary period where the soul is weighed in silence. The candidate approaches without ornament, without privilege, and without assumption of immediate knowledge. He comes as one seeking light, yet is made to stand in the shadows until his worth is revealed. The ritual makes clear that entry into the order is not granted through curiosity or vanity, but through a disposition of obedience and the willingness to undergo the slow-burning purification of the self. The vow of secrecy is not an arbitrary test, but an alignment with the eternal law of initiation, that wisdom is preserved through silence and restraint. In this degree, the aspirant enters the hidden school of wisdom as a pupil, and the symbolism surrounding him impresses the very first lessons of discipline, patience, and reverence for truth. The novice is taught that his life henceforth is divided between the outer world and the inner sanctuary. His duties are doubled, for he remains outwardly a man among men, yet inwardly he must cultivate the seeds of illumination. The obligation laid upon him is strict. He must report regularly to his superior known as the insinuator, who guides him, observes him, and records his progress. The insinuator is the secret examiner of his thoughts, habits, and inclinations, and through this surveillance the order discerns whether he is to be advanced. This hidden supervision is not intended as tyranny, but as a mirror, for the aspirant learns through being observed that his every action, every hidden motive, bears consequence before the tribunal of reason. The novice degree therefore initiates him into a life of perpetual accountability, and he begins to learn that freedom is gained not by indulging every desire, but by bringing the will into harmony with wisdom. The symbols of the novice ritual are subtle yet deeply significant. Among the most central is the emphasis on darkness. The candidate is admitted into a chamber whose lights are dim, where secrecy is impressed upon him as the cloak under which wisdom is born. Darkness here does not mean ignorance but gestation, the soil in which the seed of light germinates. The initiate learns that one must first descend into silence and obscurity before the divine spark of enlightenment can arise. This teaching parallels the mysteries of ancient initiation where the neophyte was first plunged into darkness, representing death to the profane life, before being raised into the light of sacred knowledge. The novice thus embodies the universal archetype of the soul's descent into the womb of transformation. A central part of his instruction is the requirement of absolute discretion. The oath he swears binds him not only in word but in spirit, for to reveal the secrets of the order is not simply to betray men but to betray the higher light itself. The aspirant is warned that indiscretion not only damages the society but extinguishes his own path of progress. He is reminded that the word once spoken cannot be recalled, and that silence is the guardian of power. This teaching is ancient, resonating with the Pythagorean discipline of silence and the Hermetic maxim that the mysteries are revealed only to the worthy. The novice, by learning restraint, learns the first principle of mastery. For it is through mastering the tongue that the mind begins to govern the body, and through governing oneself one prepares to govern in wisdom. The novice is also commanded to practice virtue in his outer life, not as a mask but as proof of the internal work. He must be punctual, orderly, and truthful. His duties include submitting reports on his own life, describing his habits, his associates, his strengths, and his weaknesses. The order in turn evaluates him not by words alone but by the life he demonstrates. In this manner, the novice degree is both symbolic initiation and practical discipline. It insists that philosophy cannot be divorced from conduct, that spiritual ascent is proven through the smallest acts of daily virtue. The Illuminati therefore bind the novice to a path where the inner mysteries must find expression in the outer life, where the personal is transmuted into the universal, and where the initiate becomes a living temple for the greater light of wisdom. The novice is further reminded that the order is not an idle fraternity but a school of transformation. He is warned against the vanity of seeking titles or outward recognition, for within these walls every man stands equal before the tribunal of reason. Rank and advancement come not from birth, wealth, or boasting, but from the quiet demonstration of worthiness. The rituals emphasize that the order seeks not the multitude but the select few who are capable of true illumination. Therefore, the novice must learn to endure the trial of patience, to remain steadfast though advancement is not immediate, and to devote himself to study, reflection, and service. His probation is designed to expose vanity and ambition, for such qualities, if not mastered, become the ruin of both the individual and the society. The true aspirant proves himself not through impatience but through humility, and in that humility he becomes capable of receiving wisdom. The symbolic tools presented to the novice further impress this lesson. He is shown the writing tablet upon which he must record his reflections, reports, and observations. This is not merely a practical exercise but a spiritual discipline, for writing is a mirror of thought, and through it the aspirant begins to see himself more clearly. The practice of confession before the order is not meant to humiliate but to awaken self-knowledge, which is the foundation of all philosophy. He is also given access to books and instructed in reading and study, for the Illuminati consider learning the chief weapon of enlightenment. Yet the books themselves are not the end but the beginning, for the true purpose is to cultivate discernment, to distinguish truth from error, and to awaken reason as the light within the soul. The insinuator plays a profound symbolic role in the life of the novice. Outwardly he appears as a supervisor, but inwardly he represents the higher self, the guardian of conscience that silently observes every action. By reporting to his insinuator, the novice practices accountability to the divine reason within. This psychological mechanism trains the aspirant to live under constant watchfulness, even when alone, until he realizes that nothing is hidden from the eyes of wisdom. Thus, the ritual dramatizes the awakening of the inner witness, the eternal flame of spirit that sees all and judges all. The novice learns that to conceal vice from others is vain, for the true tribunal is within, and there his soul must stand naked before the light of truth. The obligation of obedience is also impressed upon him with solemnity. The novice must obey his superiors promptly and without question, not as blind submission but as a training of the will. In obeying others he learns to master himself, for obedience requires the sacrifice of pride and the subjugation of selfish impulse. This discipline mirrors the monastic traditions of both East and West, where obedience to a master purifies the disciple's character and prepares him for higher mysteries. The Illuminati sought to cultivate in their members the virtues necessary for both personal and social perfection, and obedience was considered indispensable. Only one who has learned to obey in wisdom is capable of ruling in justice, for true authority is born from the balance of power and humility. The novice is also instructed in the greater purpose of the order, though only in veiled form. He is told that the aim is the improvement of mankind through the cultivation of virtue and reason, the enlightenment of society, and the eventual establishment of a universal harmony founded upon truth. This vision is given not as a dogma but as an inspiration, for the novice must carry within him the seed of this greater work. He is reminded that he belongs to something larger than himself, a current of wisdom that stretches back through the mysteries of antiquity and forward into the destiny of humanity. His small efforts in study, discipline, and secrecy are not trivial but part of a vast architecture of illumination. The ritual closes with the sense that the novice has entered into a sacred covenant, a hidden brotherhood bound by silence, virtue, and the pursuit of wisdom, and that his journey has only just begun. The novice now finds himself under the weight of an invisible architecture of responsibility. Each day becomes a ritual in itself, for his actions, words, and even unspoken thoughts are placed within the crucible of observation. He begins to learn that initiation is not contained within the ceremonial chamber, but continues in every breath of life. The Illuminati designed this first stage to dissolve the illusion that wisdom can be attained in a single moment of revelation. Instead, it is shown that illumination is a gradual ascent, a patient accumulation of light through countless acts of discipline and reflection. The novice who endures this test begins to cultivate a new rhythm of life, where each action is weighed, each decision examined, and each habit slowly refined into harmony with the higher law. In this degree, the aspirant also comes to confront his own shadows. The reports he must submit force him to reflect upon his weaknesses and expose the hidden corners of his character. Pride, sloth, anger, and indulgence rise to the surface as he attempts to write truthfully of himself. Many recoil at this mirror, Yet the courageous persist, knowing that only through confronting the shadow can the soul ascend. This ordeal of self-examination is the true initiation of the novice. For in the silence of his chamber, writing by dim light, he begins to hear the voice of conscience with new clarity. What once was dismissed as a passing thought now resounds with the authority of truth. The novice discovers that initiation is not the bestowal of foreign wisdom, but the awakening of the wisdom already present within the depths of the soul. The sacred geometry of this first step is also concealed within the structure of the ritual. The novice is placed at the base of the pyramid of degrees, symbolizing both humility and potential. Just as the pyramid ascends from the broad foundation to the single point at its summit, so too must the novice begin with the wide base of moral discipline before he can hope to reach the pinnacle of illumination. He is shown that the order is not arbitrary, but built upon a divine proportion, an architecture of degrees that mirrors the ascent of the soul from multiplicity to unity. The Minerval degree, which lies above, is hinted at but not revealed, just as the higher chambers of the pyramid are hidden from one standing at its base. The novice learns that mystery itself is a teacher, that the unseen beckons him upward and preserves his longing for greater light. The esoteric meaning of secrecy is also unfolded in layers. Secrecy is not only protection against the profane, but also the inner discipline of containing energy. Words, when spoken idly, dissipate power, but silence conserves it. By learning to seal his lips, the novice learns to seal the gates of his mind, to prevent the leakage of energy that weakens the soul. This is the inner alchemy of silence. Just as the Hermetic philosophers taught that the vessel must be sealed in order for transmutation to occur, so too must the novice seal himself in discretion, allowing the hidden fire of wisdom to transform him from within. Thus, secrecy is revealed as more than a social necessity, it is a spiritual technology. To be silent is to gather power, and to gather power is to prepare for illumination. Finally, the novice is shown that this degree is not an end but a threshold. The ritual leaves him with questions unanswered, symbols unexplained, and promises yet to be fulfilled. This deliberate incompleteness stirs his longing and tests his resolve. If he is content with half-light, he will falter. If he hungers for truth, he will endure. The order uses this hunger to kindle within him the sacred flame of aspiration. True initiation, they teach, begins when the soul yearns so deeply for light that it willingly embraces discipline, secrecy, and self-purification. The novice who passes through this stage with faith and perseverance will find himself prepared for the Minerval degree, where the hidden lamp of wisdom is unveiled and the journey into deeper mysteries begins. If this exploration resonated with the part of you that knows there is more to reality than what we see, then our journey together has only just begun. Each week we delve into the profound mysteries of consciousness, from ancient wisdom to modern science, to help unlock the secrets of your own magnificent being. Subscribe and activate the bell to join a community of fellow navigators and seekers. Let's continue to explore the unseen together. Chapter 2. The Minerval degree. The Minerval degree opens before the aspirant as the first true threshold of the order, a passage from the probationary obscurity of the novice into the living temple of wisdom. It is called the Minerval Church, for it is here that the initiate joins a circle of kindred seekers gathered under the eye of Minerva, the goddess of wisdom. The rituals of admission are solemn yet restrained, for the candidate is not yet permitted the full majesty of the mysteries, but rather a glimpse of their order and purpose. The chamber of reception is prepared with care, its symbols veiled in simplicity, yet each carries a depth of meaning that extends beyond its appearance. The Minerval is instructed to bring himself humbly, without expectation of reward or ornament, and to remember that entry into this degree is not the culmination of his trial, but the beginning of a greater responsibility. The ritual begins with the declaration that those who enter the Minerval Church enter into a temple of light and reason. The candidate, having endured the discipline of the novice, is now welcomed into a community where truth is honored in its purest form. He is received by the assembly, yet his reception is not marked by fanfare or spectacle, but by the calm silence of watchful wisdom. This silence is itself the first lesson, for the Minerval must learn that wisdom is not proclaimed in noise but cultivated in quietness. The stillness of the chamber reflects the stillness that must take root in the heart, a stillness without which no true illumination can occur. Here, as in the ancient mysteries, the aspirant learns that the first temple is silence and the first priestess is reverence. At the center of the ritual stands the owl of Minerva, the emblem of the degree and its most profound symbol. The owl is a creature of the night, a silent hunter whose vision pierces the darkness. To the uninitiated it seems an ill omen, a bird of shadows, yet to the wise it represents the faculty of insight that perceives where others are blind. The owl's nocturnal nature reveals that wisdom does not fear darkness, but dwells within it, perceiving the light that hides in obscurity. The aspirant is told that the owl is the guardian of the mysteries, whose watchful eyes penetrate falsehood, and whose silent wings move unseen through the night. To bear the sign of the owl is to commit oneself to the pursuit of wisdom that sees beyond appearances, that remains unshaken by the blindness of the multitude, and that acts without drawing attention to itself. The silence of the owl is equally instructive. Unlike the chatter of common birds, the owl flies without sound, teaching that true wisdom moves invisibly, without ostentation, without clamoring for recognition. The Minerval learns here that words are not the measure of understanding, but rather the discipline to hold one's tongue until speech is required. The rite impresses that the initiate is to become like the owl, dwelling in stillness, perceiving in darkness, and acting with quiet precision. The occult lesson is clear. Wisdom is not accumulated by restless noise, but by gathering the light of stillness into the heart until it shines without the need of proclamation. The Minsolval degree also represents the crossing of a threshold guarded by silence. In the Gnostic traditions of antiquity, the initiate approaching the inner sanctuary encountered the gatekeeper, who demanded proof of readiness before entry. This figure symbolized the boundary between the profane and the sacred, between ignorance and knowledge. Likewise, the Minsolval is received into a guarded space, where entry requires not only oath and secrecy, but the disposition of soul that accepts discipline. The silence of the chamber is the modern echo of the ancient gatekeeper, reminding the candidate that wisdom cannot be entered by force, but only by reverence and readiness. To the unprepared, silence is emptiness. To the prepared, silence is the first speech of the mysteries. In this way, the Minerval ritual unites the legacy of the ancient mystery schools with the practical discipline of the Illuminati. The candidate is not only told of secrecy but placed within its atmosphere, where silence reigns as sovereign and each gesture is deliberate. The ceremonial actions are few but potent, designed to awaken reflection rather than dazzle the senses. This simplicity is itself a teaching, for wisdom is not in ornament but in essence, not in the abundance of symbols but in the depth of their meaning. Thus the Minerval learns that the mysteries conceal themselves not by excess but by economy, and that the silence of the ritual speaks more powerfully than the noise of profane ceremonies. The Minerval Church is presented to the initiate as a place of fellowship, yet its fellowship is not of idle social gathering but of mutual striving toward perfection. Each member is called a brother, yet this brotherhood is not based upon blood or nation, but upon the shared pursuit of truth. The circle of Minervals is described as a family bound together by secrecy, virtue, and the service of enlightenment. Here the initiate learns the deeper meaning of fraternity, not as an indulgence in camaraderie, but as a spiritual discipline where each is a mirror for the other. In this way, the Minerval degree teaches that brotherhood is not an end in itself but a medium through which wisdom is cultivated. For one does not grow in isolation but through the presence of those who also seek the light. The obligations of the Minerval are precise. He is bound to secrecy more strictly than before, and now this secrecy takes on an even more spiritual dimension. The silence of the novice was probationary, but the silence of the Minerval is consecrated, for he now enters the circle where words have weight and silence guards the sanctity of wisdom. He is required to attend assemblies, to report his reflections and to practice virtue with even greater vigilance. The ritual makes clear that negligence is not tolerated, for the Minerval is no longer in trial alone but part of the collective labor of the order. Every failing becomes a burden to the whole, every victory a contribution to the light of the society. Thus the initiate begins to see himself not as an isolated seeker, but as a cell in a living organism, whose health depends on the fidelity of each part. The symbolism of Minerva herself extends beyond the owl that bears her image. Minerva is the Roman goddess of wisdom, strategy, and the crafts, born from the head of Jupiter fully armed, a child of divine reason. She is therefore the emblem of rational enlightenment, the victory of intellect over chaos, the harmony of discipline and inspiration. To invoke her name is to invoke the triumph of reason guided by virtue. In the Minerval Church, she is presented not as a distant deity but as a living archetype, the pattern of the enlightened soul. The initiate is called to emulate her qualities, to cultivate a mind sharpened by study, a heart disciplined by virtue, and a will tempered by justice. Minerva is thus both symbol and exemplar, the divine image toward which the Minerval must strive. The chamber of the Minerval is adorned with emblems that instruct without speech. Among them are the lamp, the book, and the circle. The lamp represents the light of reason, burning steadily against the darkness of ignorance. It is a reminder that wisdom is not a sudden blaze but a constant flame, requiring oil to be fed through study and vigilance. The book symbolizes learning, the written word as the treasury of human knowledge, and the responsibility to seek truth within it. Yet the book also conceals the mystery that true wisdom is not bound by letters but revealed in the soul that contemplates them. The circle, drawn around the assembly, signifies unity, eternity, and the equality of all who enter within it. The Minerval learns that in the circle there is neither first nor last, neither high nor low, but a single harmony of seekers gathered around the center of truth. The comparison to the Hermetic silence is especially profound. The Hermetic philosophers taught that the ineffable truths of the divine could not be expressed in common speech, but only hinted at through symbols, myths, and silence. They instructed their disciples to guard the mysteries with discretion, for to speak openly of them would profane their sanctity and distort their meaning. The Minerval degree revives this Hermetic discipline, training the aspirant to speak little and to contemplate much, to preserve truth within the vessel of the heart until it is ripened and ready to be shared with the worthy. This silence is not emptiness but fullness, the silence of a vessel brimming with light, which overflows only when another vessel is prepared to receive. Thus the Minerval learns that silence itself is a language, the hidden speech of the mysteries that communicates more deeply than words. Chapter 3. The Illuminatus Minor. The degree of the Illuminatus Minor marks a decisive turning in the initiatory path, where the novice was probationary, and the Minerval symbolic of entrance into the Temple of Wisdom. The Illuminatus Minor degree begins the ascent into deeper knowledge. Here the initiate first perceives the structure of the mysteries laid out before him, a design that reveals both the outer path of advancement and the inner ascent of the soul. The ritual of reception presents him not only with oaths and obligations, but also with a vision of the hidden architecture of the order, embodied in the image of the pyramid of degrees. This pyramid is not only a chart of organizational structure, but a symbol of spiritual ascent, teaching that illumination is attained step by step, as the soul is refined from multiplicity into unity. The initiate standing at the threshold of this degree comes to understand that his earlier stages were only preparation, and that the true labor of inner transformation now begins in earnest. The pyramid of degrees is presented to him as a diagram of ascent, each level rising above the one before, narrowing as it ascends until it terminates in the summit of illumination. Outwardly it represents the organization of the order, showing how each degree builds upon the foundation of the former. Inwardly it reveals the soul's journey from the broad base of worldly life to the singular point of union with truth. The initiate is told that just as a pyramid cannot stand without its foundation, so too the higher mysteries cannot be grasped without the firm establishment of virtue and discipline. The novice and Minerval degrees were the wide base, preparing him with silence, secrecy, and moral duty. As Illuminatus Minor, he begins the narrowing ascent, where the path becomes more demanding, requiring greater discernment and inner mastery. This symbolism impresses upon him that progress in the mysteries is not haphazard, but governed by divine proportion, each stage an indispensable step toward perfection. The ritual also emphasizes the esoteric power of oaths. The initiate is again bound by solemn promises, but in this degree he learns that oaths are not external restraints, but spiritual instruments. An oath is the binding of speech to will, the aligning of word with intention, the forging of thought into action. To swear falsely is to fracture the unity of the soul, to sever the bond between inner and outer being. To swear truthfully and keep it is to harmonize speech, will, and action into a single stream of power. The Illuminatus Minor is taught that the word is sacred, a creative force that shapes both self and world. By binding himself with oaths, he does not lose freedom but gains mastery, for he learns to speak only what he intends and to will only what accords with truth. In this way, the ritual deepens his understanding of secrecy, showing that it is not merely the concealment of knowledge but the sanctification of the word through fidelity. This degree also marks the beginning of the initiate's spiritual labor and discernment. Having entered the circle of the Minevals, he now learns that not all knowledge is equal, nor all appearance is trustworthy. He must cultivate the ability to distinguish truth from illusion, the real from the false, the essential from the trivial. This discernment is not only intellectual but spiritual, requiring the purification of perception itself. The initiate is taught to examine his motives, to test the inspirations that arise within him, to measure every impulse against the standard of reason and virtue. Just as the pyramid narrows toward the summit, so too must his attention become concentrated, focusing upon what is essential and discarding the distractions of ignorance. This discipline of discernment is the heart of the Illuminatus Minor degree, for only by it can the soul ascend beyond the confusion of the world into the clarity of illumination. The transition into the Illuminatus Minor degree also impresses upon the initiate that knowledge itself can be dangerous when untempered by wisdom. He is warned that curiosity without discipline leads to error, and that illumination is not the accumulation of facts but the transformation of the soul into harmony with truth. The pyramid of degrees makes clear that higher knowledge is revealed gradually, for only in this gradual unveiling can the aspirant be protected from pride and misuse. To receive wisdom before the character is prepared would be to turn light into darkness, for the unpurified will bend truth into a weapon for ambition. The initiate therefore learns that secrecy is not imposed as tyranny but as mercy, guarding both the mysteries from profanation and the aspirant from his own immaturity. By this understanding, he begins to see that his oaths are not shackles but shields, preserving the sanctity of the work until he is strong enough to bear it. The ritual also instructs the Illuminatus Minor in the art of inner discipline. He must cultivate mastery over his thoughts, words, and actions, training himself as one would train a sacred instrument. He learns that the mind must be ordered, freed from distraction and idle speculation, for a scattered mind cannot receive illumination. The tongue must be restrained, for careless speech dissipates power and betrays the sanctity of silence. The body must be governed, for indulgence in excess weakens the will and clouds perception. By practicing this triune discipline, the initiate begins to experience the harmony of the inner temple, where thought, speech, and deed align under the sovereignty of reason. This harmony is the first taste of illumination, a foretaste of the unity symbolized by the summit of the pyramid. The oath of the Illuminatus Minor also deepens the initiate's sense of accountability. He swears not only secrecy but fidelity to the path, binding himself to the pursuit of truth and the service of humanity. His word becomes a covenant, not only with his brethren but with his own higher self. By keeping faith with his oath, he strengthens his will, forging a bond between intention and action that becomes the very foundation of spiritual power. By breaking it, he would fracture his soul, descending into contradiction and weakness. Thus, the oath becomes both safeguard and sacrament, impressing upon the initiate that every word uttered in sincerity before the mysteries carries eternal consequence. Through this realization, he begins to sense the sacred weight of speech, and he learns to guard his words as treasures. The pyramid of degrees also serves as a mirror of the cosmos. The initiate is shown that just as the pyramid narrows from multiplicity into unity, so too the universe emanates from the one into the many. To ascend the pyramid is therefore to reverse the cosmic procession, returning from division into unity, from appearance into essence. Each degree is a rung on this ladder of return, a stage in the soul's pilgrimage back to its divine origin. The Illuminatus Minor learns that his advancement is not for himself alone, but is a microcosm of the universal ascent, a participation in the great return of all things to their source. This realization deepens his sense of purpose, teaching him that his labor in secrecy and discipline is part of a cosmic drama, a reflection of the eternal law of ascent that governs both man and cosmos. The work of discernment grows sharper at this stage. The initiate is taught that truth often appears veiled, that wisdom hides beneath symbols and allegories, and that the false often wears the mask of truth. He must therefore develop the eye that sees beneath appearances, the ear that hears the hidden meaning, the heart that discerns the real from the counterfeit. This faculty of discernment is not merely intellectual but spiritual, for it arises from the purification of the will. Only the pure of heart can see clearly, for passion distorts perception and desire blinds reason. The Illuminatus minor is called to cleanse himself continually, to strip away prejudice, pride and selfishness, until his inner vision becomes transparent to the light of truth. This is the work of the degree, the spiritual labor that prepares him for the greater mysteries that lie ahead. The Illuminatus minor is shown that his path is not a solitary climb but a guided ascent under the watch of those who have gone before. The pyramid not only represents degrees of attainment, but also the living chain of initiates who occupy them. At the higher levels stand the guides and superiors who preserve the wisdom of the order and ensure its faithful transmission. To be admitted as minor is to take one's place within this structure, no longer a seeker at the periphery, but a participant in the ordered hierarchy of illumination. This belonging is not a privilege, but a responsibility, for every rung of the pyramid bears the weight of those who climb above it. If the foundation falters, the summit cannot stand. The initiate thus learns that fidelity at his stage is indispensable to the harmony of the whole, and that his smallest actions ripple upward into the greater edifice of wisdom. The degree also begins to awaken in him a sense of the esoteric meaning of history and society. He is told that the world outside is filled with disorder, because men live without hierarchy of soul, chasing passions without discipline and pursuing knowledge without wisdom. The pyramid of the Illuminati stands as an image of what society itself must become, ordered in harmony with reason, narrowing upward to a summit where truth reigns supreme. The initiate is reminded that his personal ascent mirrors the destiny of mankind, and that the work of the order is to perfect both the individual and the collective through the principles of virtue, secrecy, and discipline. In this way, the Illuminatus minor sees that his labor, though hidden, participates in the larger task of restoring harmony to the world. The oaths taken at this stage are not only personal but universal in significance. To bind speech to will is to participate in the eternal law by which the divine word gave birth to creation. The initiate is told that the Logos, the creative reason, brought forth all things by utterance, and that every human word echoes this primal act. To speak in truth is to align oneself with the divine act of creation. To speak falsely is to descend into chaos and dissolution. Thus each oath renews in miniature the covenant between the soul and the divine, binding the initiate into harmony with the eternal order. By learning to guard his words, he learns to guard his creative power, and by aligning his speech with truth, he begins to manifest harmony in both self and world. The inner discipline required of the Illuminatus minor extends further than before, demanding a refinement of conscience itself. He must not only govern his actions but probe their motives, discerning whether they arise from vanity, fear, or genuine devotion to truth. He is taught that true virtue is not the mere appearance of good conduct, but the purification of intention, for the soul is illuminated not by outward conformity, but by inward alignment with the light. Each report he makes to his superiors thus becomes a confession of motives as well as deeds, a continual examination that strips away pretense and awakens sincerity. Through this process, the initiate begins to build within himself a sanctuary of truth, where every act is weighed upon the scales of conscience before it is brought into the world. The pyramid of degrees finally becomes to him not only an external chart of advancement but an internal map of the soul. The base represents the multiplicity of his lower nature, filled with conflicting impulses and scattered desires. As he ascends, these impulses are ordered and unified, narrowed into the central path of reason. The summit symbolizes the soul unified in purpose, a single flame rising toward the source of light. The Illuminatus minor thus perceives that initiation is not the acquisition of hidden law, but the reordering of the self into harmony with the divine pattern. This realization plants within him the seed of perseverance, for he sees that every effort at discipline, every moment of secrecy kept, every word guarded, brings him closer to the summit where truth dwells in unity. The Illuminatus minor also begins to recognize that discernment is a weapon as well as a shield. The world outside the order is a labyrinth of false lights, where superstition, ambition, and deceit masquerade as wisdom. Without the faculty to distinguish the true from the false, the seeker is easily led astray into systems that promise enlightenment but deliver bondage. The discipline of this degree trains him to pierce such illusions, not by rejecting the outer forms of religion or philosophy outright, but by weighing them in the balance of reason and virtue. He learns to accept what aligns with truth and to discard what leads to corruption, thus building within himself a compass that will guide him through the storms of doctrine and the seductions of error. This power of discernment becomes the shield of the soul, preserving him from falsehood, and the sword by which he cuts through the veils that conceal the essence of wisdom. The ritual conveys that secrecy is itself a school of discernment. To live bound by oaths forces the initiate to measure his words and examine his impulses before revealing them. This constant self-restraint trains him to distinguish between what is essential and what is trivial, between what must be spoken and what must be concealed. In guarding the secrets of the order, he learns to guard the secrets of his own soul, to recognize which truths may be shared and which must be preserved in silence until the time is ripe. This discipline mirrors the wisdom of the ancients who veiled the mysteries in allegory and symbol, knowing that the unprepared would only distort what they could not yet comprehend. The Illuminatus Minor thus becomes a guardian of proportion, learning that to reveal too much is as dangerous as to conceal too little, and that wisdom dwells in the balance of disclosure and silence. As his obligations deepen, so too does his awareness of the inner battle that defines the path of illumination. The initiate comes to see that the pyramid is not only climbed outwardly but built inwardly, stone by stone, through victories over the self. Each passion mastered, each temptation overcome, each impulse purified becomes a block in the inner temple that rises toward the summit of truth. He realizes that the true enemy is not external but internal, that ignorance, vanity, and desire are the chains that bind the soul to the base of the pyramid. By engaging in the daily labor of discipline, he wages the great war of illumination, whose battlefield is the heart and whose victory is the conquest of the self. This is the labor to which the Illuminatus Minor is consecrated, and through it he begins to sense the grandeur of the path that lies before him. The degree impresses finally that illumination is a lifelong work, not a sudden gift. The initiate is told that the mysteries open only as far as his fidelity and virtue permit, that each step of ascent must be earned by labor and confirmed by discipline. No man may leap to the summit, for such haste destroys the foundation and leads to collapse. The pyramid is ascended stone by stone, degree by degree, life by life, until the soul is refined into harmony with the eternal light. The Illuminatus Minor learns that his present stage is not small but essential, for without fidelity in this degree he cannot hope for advancement. This realization humbles him, yet also strengthens his resolve, for he understands that each act of secrecy kept, each word guarded, each impulse purified, is itself a step upward toward the eternal unity that crowns the pyramid. Thus, the Illuminatus Minor degree marks the turning from preparation to ascent, from probation to transformation. The initiate is entrusted with the vision of the pyramid, the discipline of oaths, and the labor of discernment, all of which prepare him for the higher mysteries that await. He is reminded that every word, every thought, every act contributes either to his ascent or to his fall, and that the mysteries conceal nothing from the soul that perseveres in virtue. With this charge he enters the work of illumination in earnest, setting his feet upon the narrowing path that leads from multiplicity into unity, from silence into wisdom, and from the shadow of ignorance into the radiant summit of truth. Chapter 4. The Illuminatus Major. The degree of the Illuminatus Major represents a decisive elevation within the hidden school of wisdom. If the minor degree revealed to the initiate the pyramid of degrees as an image of the path, the major degree demands that he begin to embody the structure within himself. It is the moment where the aspirant ceases to be a student of discipline alone and becomes a co-worker in the labor of illumination. Here the mysteries unfold with greater depth, revealing not only the architecture of the order but also the interior temple of the soul. The ritual of admission is solemn, marked by both the weight of new oaths and the unveiling of symbols whose meanings are at once practical, moral, and esoteric. The initiate steps from preparation into participation, no longer content with silence and self-examination alone, but now called to act as a channel through which the light of wisdom may shine into the world. The ritual of reception begins by emphasizing the continuity of the path. The Illuminatus Major is reminded that nothing in this degree abolishes what has gone before. The silence of the novice, the fellowship of the Meneval, the discernment of the minor all must be carried upward into this higher stage. He is taught that each degree is a foundation upon which the next is built, and that to neglect the earlier is to undermine the later. Yet while continuity is preserved, expansion is also granted. The obligations deepen, the vision widens, and the responsibility grows. He is charged to act not only as a seeker but as a guide to those below him, for the order advances by the living chain of mutual instruction, each degree transmitting its light downward as it receives illumination from above. Thus the Major is initiated not for himself alone but for the service of the order and the world. One of the central revelations of this degree is the symbolism of the inner temple. The initiate is shown that the true sanctuary is not the external chamber, nor even the collective body of the order, but the purified soul itself. He is told that the mysteries of architecture, so often veiled in the traditions of masonry, are fulfilled within the human being, who is both temple and priest. The columns of this temple are his virtues, the altar his conscience, the lamp his reason, and the sanctuary his inmost spirit. To build this temple is the labor of the Illuminatus Major, stone by stone, thought by thought, act by act, until the dwelling of the divine light is completed within. This teaching deepens the meaning of every earlier degree, for the silence of the novice, the vigilance of the Minival, and the discernment of the minor now reveal themselves as preparatory labors in the construction of this inner edifice. The oaths taken in this degree are weightier still, binding the initiate to fidelity not only in secrecy but in action. He pledges to labor for the perfection of himself and of society, to defend truth against falsehood, and to protect the mysteries against both profanation and neglect. The ritual emphasizes that the oath is not to be taken lightly, for every word uttered binds him before the tribunal of eternity. He is told that to swear falsely is to fracture the harmony of the soul, while to keep faith is to strengthen the temple within. The oath thus becomes not a restraint but a consecration, transforming the will into a vessel of light. Through this binding of word and will, the Illuminatus Major learns the sacred art of aligning speech, intention, and action into a unity that mirrors the harmony of the divine order. The degree also instructs the initiate in the discipline of inner light. He is taught that illumination does not come from without, but must be awakened within the soul. The external symbols are but reflections of an inner reality, signs that point toward the hidden radiance already present in the depths of the spirit. The work of the Major is to kindle this flame, to fan it into brightness through meditation, study, and virtue, until it becomes a lamp that shines both inwardly and outwardly. He learns that the greater mysteries cannot be bestowed by others, for no ritual, however solemn, can impart illumination. They can only awaken, guide, and guard the process by which the soul discovers the light already within it. Thus the Illuminatus Major becomes a laborer in his own transfiguration, responsible for tending the sacred fire that will one day unite him with the eternal source of wisdom. The transition into the major degree also opens before the initiate the vision of a wider mission, where the earlier grades focused upon secrecy, self-examination, and discernment. The Illuminatus Major is told that his labor must now expand beyond himself. He is entrusted with the duty of assisting the minor and Minival below him, acting as a silent guide and examiner to those who still tread the earlier stages. This responsibility is not for power but for service, for he is warned that any abuse of authority will lead not to advancement but to downfall. The pyramid of the order rises only because each degree supports the others, and the Major now becomes a stone upon which others may ascend. In this service he begins to taste the essence of illumination itself, which is never selfish possession, but the radiation of light for the benefit of others. The ritual also impresses upon him the esoteric significance of hierarchy. He learns that hierarchy is not tyranny but order, not oppression but harmony. Just as the cosmos is arranged in ascending spheres, each reflecting the light of the one above it, so too the order is arranged in degrees, each transmitting wisdom downward and receiving it upward. To stand as a major is to take one's rightful place within this harmony, balancing obedience to superiors with responsibility to inferiors. In this structure, the initiate perceives a reflection of the divine chain of being, and he is reminded that the same law governs both heaven and earth. To reject hierarchy is to descend into chaos, but to embrace it is to participate in the eternal order of illumination. The symbolism of light and darkness is deepened at this stage. The minor degree revealed the pyramid narrowing toward unity. The major now experiences the passage from twilight into clearer day. He is told that illumination does not arrive in sudden brilliance, for such light would blind rather than enlighten. Instead, it dawns gradually, like the rising of the sun, dispelling the shadows step by step until the soul is fully bathed in radiance. The ritual chamber reflects this lesson through the careful play of light, teaching that wisdom is unveiled only in proportion to readiness. The initiate learns to honor the gradual, to cherish the small increase of light, and to understand that even partial illumination is a sacred gift. By cultivating patience, he prepares himself for the greater mysteries yet concealed beyond his present stage. The oaths of the major carry also a political and social dimension. The initiate is bound to labor for the improvement of society, to spread enlightenment wherever possible without betraying the secrets of the order. He is told that the darkness of ignorance that enslaves mankind can only be dispelled through the steady work of reason, education, and virtue. As a major, he becomes an agent of this work, charged to act in his profession, his community, and his private life as a silent force of illumination. He must speak truth with discretion, oppose falsehood without malice, and embody in his conduct the harmony he has learned within the order. In this way, the mysteries become a living influence in the world, not through outward proclamations but through the quiet radiation of lives transformed by the inner light. The spiritual work of the Illuminatus Major is summed up in the twin disciplines of inward purification and outward service. He must continue the labor of self-mastery, cleansing the temple within, while at the same time bearing the responsibility of guiding others and improving society. This double labor mirrors the twofold law of illumination: to perfect oneself and to perfect the world. Neither task can be neglected, for the soul cannot ascend while neglecting its duty to mankind, nor can it serve others without tending the inner flame. The major thus learns to balance contemplation and action, silence and speech, secrecy and service, until his life becomes a harmony of the inner and outer, the visible and invisible, the personal and universal. This balance is the essence of the major degree, the preparation for the even greater responsibilities that await in the higher mysteries. The ascent to the major degree further instructs the initiate that illumination is inseparable from sacrifice. He is told plainly that the further one advances, the more is demanded, and that the price of wisdom is the surrender of selfishness. The minor learn to discipline thought and speech. The major must begin to discipline his very will, bending it to the service of truth rather than desire. He is reminded that ambition, pride, and vanity are the ruins of initiates, for they divert the light toward the self and extinguish its radiance. To be major is therefore to renounce self-will in order to become a vessel of higher purpose. This renunciation is not loss but liberation, for by releasing the narrow chains of ego, the initiate enters into the vast freedom of the universal. The ritual dramatizes this sacrifice through symbols of the altar and the flame. The altar represents the heart of the initiate, and upon it he is called to place all that is unworthy, casting away vices, attachments, and selfish aims. The flame represents the higher reason, the divine spark that consumes and purifies. In imagination and in spirit, the major lays his life upon this altar, offering himself as a living sacrifice to truth. This act is not theatrical but interior, a solemn dedication that binds him forever to the path. By this he learns that illumination is not bestowed without cost, and that every step upward requires the burning away of impurities. The more he ascends, the more he must surrender, until only the purified soul remains to stand in the light. The initiate is also entrusted with the deeper meaning of the chain of secrecy. He is told that his silence not only protects the order, but also weaves him into the invisible fraternity of all ages. Every initiate who has ever sworn to guard the mysteries lives again in that silence, and by keeping faith, the major becomes part of an unbroken lineage of guardians stretching back into antiquity. He learns that secrecy is not only a discipline of restraint but also a communion, a hidden bond uniting him to sages, philosophers, and seekers who kept the mysteries alive through centuries of darkness. To betray this bond would be to sever himself from that living chain. To keep it is to participate in the timeless fellowship of light. In this way, the oath of the Major connects him not only to his brethren present, but to the invisible company of initiates throughout history. The work of discernment deepens in this degree, moving beyond the examination of personal motives into the discernment of forces at work in society. The Major is trained to perceive the hidden currents beneath political and cultural life, to distinguish enlightenment from superstition, liberty from license, progress from corruption. He is cautioned that appearances deceive, that what is called reform may conceal tyranny, and what is dismissed as tradition may conceal wisdom. He must therefore learn to weigh all movements in the scales of truth, neither rushing to embrace nor to reject, but measuring carefully their essence. This discernment prepares him to labor for the improvement of society without falling prey to false lights or destructive zeal. It is the discipline of the statesman-philosopher, who acts not from impulse but from wisdom, and whose every decision reflects the harmony of the inner temple. The Illuminatus Major is finally given a vision of his destiny within the mysteries. He is told that this degree is not the summit but only a higher stage of preparation, a threshold into the greater mysteries where the deepest doctrines and most solemn responsibilities are reserved. Yet even this anticipation is enough to kindle reverence and perseverance. For the first time he perceives clearly that initiation is not the bestowal of secrets, but the gradual unfolding of the soul toward its own illumination. The path rises before him like the narrowing steps of the pyramid, each stage demanding more, each stage unveiling more, until the summit is reached. With this vision he renews his dedication, embracing the labor of self-purification and service, knowing that each step brings him closer to the unity of truth and the eternal light that crowns the mysteries. The teachings of the Illuminatus Major culminate in the revelation that true illumination is not a possession but a participation. The initiate is shown that wisdom cannot be owned as property, nor stored as treasure, for the moment it is grasped selfishly, it dissolves. Rather, wisdom is a stream into which the soul is invited to enter, a current of divine reason that flows from the eternal source through all ages and all seekers. To stand as Major is to place oneself consciously within this current, to let it cleanse, guide, and elevate the soul. This understanding transforms his relationship to knowledge, for he ceases to seek it as an accumulation of doctrines and begins to live it as a way of being. Each symbol, each ritual, each silence becomes a door opening into the presence of that current, and he learns to dwell in its flow with humility and reverence. The initiate also comes to perceive that illumination is measured not by visions or secrets revealed, but by the harmony of life it produces. The true test of the Major is not what he knows in the mind, but what he embodies in character. If his speech is truthful, his actions just, his heart compassionate, and his will steadfast, then he has advanced in illumination, regardless of the mysteries still concealed from him. If, however, he clings to knowledge without embodying virtue, then he remains in darkness despite the degrees he has attained. The order insists that virtue is the only true mark of advancement, and that every ritual, every oath, every symbol is but a means to cultivate virtue within the soul. The Illuminatus Major therefore begins to judge himself not by titles but by conduct, measuring each day by the harmony he brings to self and others. The symbolism of the pyramid is now deepened one final time in this degree. The Major is told that the pyramid not only rises upward toward unity, but also descends inward toward the hidden chamber at its heart. This inner chamber represents the sanctuary of the spirit, the secret place where the soul meets the divine. To ascend without descending is vanity, for the summit cannot be reached without first entering the depths. Thus the Major is instructed in meditation and introspection, learning to turn inward as well as upward, to seek the eternal not only in the heights but also in the innermost. This dual movement of ascent and descent mirrors the rhythm of illumination itself, which is at once the rising of the soul towards truth and the deepening of the spirit into its own center. The initiate thus discovers that the path is both vertical and inward, leading him simultaneously toward the unity above and the mystery within. At this stage, the initiate is also entrusted with the duty of bearing trials without complaint. He is warned that suffering, misunderstanding, and even persecution may attend those who labor for truth in a world of ignorance. Yet he is told that such trials are not obstacles but refinements, fires that purify the soul and temper it for greater light. The Major is reminded of the sages and martyrs of antiquity who endured ridicule, exile, or death rather than betray wisdom, and he is exhorted to stand in the same fidelity should the test come to him. In this way he learns that illumination is not fragile but resilient, not a flickering candle easily extinguished, but a flame tempered by storms, burning brighter because it has endured. The oath he takes in this degree binds him to endure all things for truth, making his very life a sacrifice to the eternal light. The chapter closes with the reminder that the Major stands at a threshold. The greater mysteries remain veiled, awaiting those who persevere with purity and devotion. Yet the responsibilities already entrusted to him are weighty, demanding vigilance, discipline, and service. He is no longer a seeker only for himself, but a guardian for others, no longer a pupil only of silence, but a laborer in illumination. The path stretches ahead with promises and demands, but the initiate now knows that the summit is not unreachable, for he carries within him the light that guides every step. With humility, reverence, and steadfast will, the Illuminatus Major enters upon his work, prepared to ascend further into the mysteries and to become, in time, a living reflection of the eternal wisdom he serves. Chapter 5. The Scottish Novice and Scottish Knight. The degrees of the Scottish Novice and Scottish Knight mark an important transformation in the initiatory path of the order, where the aspirant steps from the philosophical disciplines of silence, discernment, and inner illumination into the chivalric symbolism of duty, guardianship, and action. These two stages, though closely bound together, form a bridge between the minor and major mysteries. They prepare the initiate for the deeper doctrines of the greater mysteries by clothing him in the archetype of the knight, the spiritual warrior whose battles are not of blood and steel, but of wisdom against ignorance, truth against falsehood, and light against darkness. To receive these degrees is to be reminded that illumination is not for the cloister alone, but for the battlefield of life, where virtue must contend with vice and knowledge must confront superstition. The Scottish Novice degree introduces the initiate to this chivalric current. He is presented with symbols of armor, weapons, and banners, but these are never literal, they are instruments of the soul. The sword he is given represents the cutting edge of reason, which divides truth from falsehood with precision. The shield signifies faith in truth, the steadfastness that deflects the assaults of ignorance and deceit. The armor symbolizes the virtues that protect the soul: justice, prudence, temperance, and fortitude, without which no knight of wisdom can stand firm. The banner raised in the ceremony represents the cause of enlightenment itself, the standard under which the initiate now marches. Through these images, the novice is reminded that he is not merely a student but a combatant in the great war of illumination, charged to defend truth with courage and constancy. The ritual of the Scottish novice emphasizes preparation rather than action. Just as a squire must train before receiving knighthood, so the novice must first learn discipline, loyalty, and endurance. He is instructed in vigilance, for the enemy of enlightenment often disguises itself in fair forms, and only the watchful can discern it. He is taught loyalty, for betrayal within the ranks is more destructive than any assault from without. He is trained in endurance, for the path of truth is long, filled with obstacles, and requires a will that does not falter under trial. The novice's labor is inward, training the faculties of reason, conscience, and virtue, until they are as reliable as well-forged arms. Only after proving himself faithful in these exercises may he be advanced to the dignity of the Scottish Knight. When the initiate is at last received as a Scottish Knight, the ritual expands in grandeur and solemnity. He kneels before the altar, swears the oath of fidelity, and is invested with the symbolic sword and mantle. Yet the investiture is not to elevate him above others, but to bind him more deeply to service. He is told that the true knight does not seek glory for himself but devotes his strength to the protection of the weak, the defense of truth, and the advancement of enlightenment. The ritual makes clear that the knight's enemies are not flesh and blood, but ignorance, corruption, and tyranny. His battles are fought not with steel but with words of truth, deeds of virtue, and the silent radiance of a life lived in harmony with wisdom. To be knighted in this sense is to be consecrated as a spiritual warrior, whose cause is universal and whose battlefield is the human soul. The symbolism of the knight is further illuminated by its connection to the Templars and the chivalric traditions preserved in Masonry. The Illuminati did not revive these images merely to borrow prestige from medieval orders, but to teach that every seeker must eventually become a guardian. The knight is the archetype of the guardian of light, the protector of the mysteries, the sentinel at the threshold of the temple. The initiate is reminded that wisdom without guardianship perishes, for light unprotected is soon extinguished by the winds of ignorance. The Scottish knight therefore becomes a sentinel, charged to watch over the mysteries, to shield his brethren, and to stand firm against the encroachments of falsehood. This role is not ornamental but essential, for only through the vigilance of such guardians can the temple of wisdom endure from age to age. The investiture of the Scottish knight also teaches that every virtue must be tested in action. The aspirant, clothed in the mantle of chivalry, is warned that titles and symbols are nothing without deeds. To swear fidelity is not enough. Fidelity must be lived in the silence of daily conduct. The knight who fails to embody his vows is worse than the profane, for he profanes the mysteries themselves by wearing their garments without embodying their spirit. Thus the initiate is exhorted to live as a knight at all times, in public and in private, in word and in thought, lest his knighthood become an empty shell. The standard of judgment is set high, for the order seeks not men of idle curiosity but warriors of virtue, whose lives testify to the power of illumination. The Scottish knight's sword is given an especially profound esoteric interpretation. Outwardly a weapon, inwardly it is the word, the sharp dividing principle of reason. Just as a sword cuts cleanly between flesh and bone, so reason separates truth from falsehood, unveiling what is hidden beneath appearances. The initiate learns that his tongue is his sword, and that each word spoken in truth strikes a blow against ignorance. But he is also warned that careless or deceitful speech turns the sword against himself, wounding his own soul. To wield the sword rightly is therefore to govern the tongue, to speak only with fidelity to truth, and to refrain from words that flatter, deceive, or destroy. In this lesson, the knight learns that mastery of speech is mastery of the sword, and that his nobility lies not in combat but in the discipline of the word. The shield of the Scottish knight represents the steadfastness of conscience. It is the inner certainty that deflects the blows of error and temptation. The initiate is told that without a shield, even the sharpest sword is useless, for he who cannot defend himself soon falls to the ground. Conscience is the shield of the soul, and only the knight who keeps it pure can stand firm against adversity. The ritual impresses this truth by reminding the knight that the world is full of enticements, wealth, honor, pleasure, that seek to lure him from fidelity. Only a conscience trained in virtue can resist these assaults and remain loyal to the cause of illumination. Thus the shield becomes not merely a symbol of protection but the very strength of integrity, which no weapon of falsehood can penetrate. The armor of the knight is interpreted as the totality of virtues that must clothe the soul. Each piece corresponds to a moral discipline: justice to the breastplate, temperance to the girdle, prudence to the helm, fortitude to the greaves. Without these, the initiate is naked before the assaults of ignorance. With them he is invulnerable, for the virtues defend the soul more surely than iron defends the body. The knight is reminded that armor must be worn daily, not only in ritual but in life, for every day brings its battle, and every moment its test. To neglect the armor is to invite defeat, to wear it faithfully is to ensure victory. Thus the degree teaches that illumination is not a single conquest but a continual warfare of virtue against vice, a vigilance that must be maintained until the soul stands perfected in the light. The banner given to the knight is the most exalted of his symbols. It represents the cause of enlightenment, the standard under which all initiates march. It is not the banner of a nation, for the knight's loyalty transcends borders. It is not the banner of a sect, for his fidelity transcends dogma. It is the banner of humanity itself, united under the light of reason and truth. To bear this banner is to pledge one's life to the universal cause, to stand for justice wherever injustice reigns, to defend truth wherever falsehood spreads, and to work for the betterment of mankind without distinction of creed or country. The knight is reminded that this banner is not to be raised in arrogance, but in humility, for it is not his personal cause but the eternal cause of illumination. To carry it faithfully is the highest honor, to betray it is the deepest shame. The teachings of the Scottish degrees also impress that the knight's struggle is fought not only in the external world, but also within the inner kingdom of the soul. The enemies he is called to resist, ignorance, corruption, tyranny, have their counterparts in his own nature. Ignorance appears as forgetfulness and distraction, corruption as selfish desire, tyranny as the domination of passion over reason. Unless he conquers these inner adversaries, his battles in the world will be hollow. Thus the ritual insists that the first duty of the Scottish knight is to govern himself. The true battlefield is the heart, and the true victory is self-mastery. Only when the inner realm is ordered in justice can the knight bring justice into the outer world. In this way, the degree continues the labor of purification begun in the earlier stages, but now expressed through the language of combat and guardianship. The knight is further instructed that vigilance is his perpetual charge. He must stand watch over the temple of wisdom, guarding it against profanation from without and negligence from within. This vigilance is symbolized by the watchfire, which must never be allowed to die. The flame represents both the light of the mysteries and the knight's own awakened reason. To let it dwindle is to betray his trust. To keep it burning is to preserve the life of the order. The initiate learns that vigilance requires constancy, for the assaults of darkness are subtle and unceasing. Indifference, weariness, and forgetfulness are as dangerous as open hostility. The knight must therefore remain always awake, guarding the light in his own soul and in the fellowship of the order, lest ignorance gain ground and extinguish the flame of illumination. The chivalric symbolism of the Scottish knight also serves to prepare the initiate for leadership. He is not advanced for his own sake, but to stand as an example to those below him. The knight is told that his life must be a banner of truth, silently teaching others by the nobility of his conduct. He must defend the weak, not only in outward affairs but also within the order where those of lesser advancement may falter. He must encourage the timid, strengthen the weary, and correct the erring, all without arrogance or severity. In this way he becomes a shepherd of the flock, a guardian who leads by service rather than by command. The degree thus teaches that leadership in the mysteries is not domination but stewardship, not privilege but sacrifice. To be knighted is to be bound, not to freedom, but to duty. The investiture also makes plain that the knight's oath is eternal. To break it is not merely to betray a society but to violate the harmony of his own soul. The words spoken in the ceremony bind him before the tribunal of truth itself, and their echo resounds through the whole course of his life. He is warned that perjury in such matters leads not only to dishonor but to spiritual dissolution, for the soul that severs word from deed tears itself apart. Fidelity, on the other hand, brings strength and unity, binding speech, will, and action into a single stream of power. Thus the knight learns that his honor is his life, and that to keep his oath is to stand unshaken even in the face of trial. The Scottish knight is finally shown that his knighthood is symbolic of the eternal archetype of the warrior of light. Every age has its guardians, whether clothed as priests, prophets, sages, or knights, who stand between the forces of illumination and the powers of darkness. By receiving this degree, the initiate takes his place in that lineage, becoming part of the invisible company of defenders who labor for truth across all ages. He is reminded that his sword is reason, his shield is virtue, his armor is character, and his banner is enlightenment. With these he is invincible, not because he cannot suffer, but because no power of ignorance can overcome fidelity to truth. Thus the Scottish knight stands consecrated as a sentinel of wisdom, prepared to guard the mysteries, to serve mankind, and to advance ever further toward the greater light that crowns the path of initiation. The Scottish novice and knight degrees also awaken the initiate to the collective dimension of illumination. Until this stage, much of his labor has been solitary, focused on silence, self-examination, and inner purification. Now he is reminded that the order is not a path for the isolated individual alone, but a fellowship bound by duty and common cause. The knight stands shoulder to shoulder with his brethren beneath the same banner, each guarding the light not only for himself but for all. This fraternity is not ornamental but essential, for the struggle against ignorance cannot be won by one alone. It requires the vigilance of many, each defending his post, each sustaining the others. Thus the knight begins to perceive that illumination is a social force, and that the mysteries, though veiled in secrecy, are ultimately aimed at the enlightenment of humanity as a whole. The ritual emphasizes that the knight's loyalty must transcend the narrow bonds of blood, nation, or sect. His allegiance is to truth itself, and therefore to all mankind. He is taught that the divisions of the world, race, creed, rank, wealth, are artifices of ignorance, while the brotherhood of the order reflects the deeper unity of humanity beneath such veils. To be knighted is to rise above partial loyalties and to swear fidelity to the universal. The banner he bears is therefore the banner of humanity itself, lifted not in conquest but in service, not in pride but in humility. By this oath, the knight is consecrated as a citizen of the world, bound to labor for the enlightenment of all without discrimination. The knight is also reminded that his enemies are subtle. Ignorance does not always appear as crudeness, but often cloaks itself in authority, superstition, or false philosophy. Tyranny may disguise itself as order, corruption as progress, vanity as enlightenment. The knight must therefore keep his discernment sharp, testing all appearances in the light of reason and virtue. He is warned that his own pride may become the most dangerous enemy, for ambition disguised as zeal can lead him to betray the very cause he serves. Humility is therefore set as the shield of the knight, without which every virtue is vulnerable. Only by recognizing his continual need for purification can he remain steadfast in fidelity to truth. The symbolism of the Scottish degrees also connects the initiate with the wider tradition of esoteric knighthood. The Templars, Hospitallers, and other orders of medieval chivalry were evoked not as historical curiosities, but as archetypes of the spiritual warrior. The Knight of the Mysteries is heir to this tradition, not by claiming its lineage, but by embodying its spirit. He is told that just as the Templars guarded the holy places, so he must guard the holy truths. Just as the Hospitallers tended the sick, so he must tend the souls weakened by ignorance. The Scottish knight therefore does not merely imitate the chivalry of the past, but renews its essence in a higher form, transmuting the weapons of steel into weapons of reason, and the battlefields of earth into the battlefield of the spirit. In conclusion, the Scottish novice and knight degrees serve as both preparation and consecration. They prepare the initiate for the greater mysteries by clothing him in the armor of virtue and consecrating him to service. They consecrate him as a guardian of the light, a sentinel of the temple, and a warrior of truth. The initiate is reminded that his knighthood is not an end but a stage, a station upon the pyramid of ascent, where he learns vigilance, fidelity, and service, before advancing into the deeper chambers of illumination. Thus armed and consecrated, the Scottish knight stands ready to guard the mysteries, to serve humanity, and to march ever onward beneath the banner of enlightenment toward the unity of truth that crowns the path. The Scottish knight is at last confronted with the solemn realization that his knighthood is not simply symbolic of a past ideal but a living summons to endure trials yet to come. The ritual reminds him that the struggle for illumination is eternal, that ignorance and corruption will always resist the advance of light, and that every generation requires guardians to defend truth against its adversaries. He is told that history itself bears witness to this conflict, as sages, prophets, and philosophers have risen in every age to battle superstition and tyranny, often at the cost of their lives. By donning the mantle of knighthood, he joins their lineage, pledging to continue their unfinished labor. This awareness binds him not only to his brethren in the present, but to the invisible fellowship of all who have fought for wisdom across the centuries. The knight also learns that his service must be given without expectation of reward. Titles, recognition, or worldly honor are forbidden as motives, for they corrupt the purity of service and turn the banner of light into an emblem of vanity. He is told that the true knight acts in silence, serving without proclamation, knowing that the fruit of his labor may not be seen in his lifetime. His only recompense is the inner joy of fidelity, the strength of conscience, and the certainty that no act of virtue is lost in the eternal account of truth. This lesson instills humility, teaching him to labor quietly for the enlightenment of mankind, leaving recognition to eternity. The ritual closes by impressing upon the knight that his armor, sword, shield, and banner are not to be laid aside but carried into every moment of his life. The armor of virtue must be worn in every trial, the sword of reason wielded in every conversation, the shield of conscience raised against every temptation, and the banner of humanity lifted in every duty. In this way, the degree transcends the ceremonial chamber, transforming the knight's whole existence into a battlefield of illumination. He is never off guard, never free of duty, never without the charge to defend truth. His entire life becomes the service of knighthood, and every act becomes part of the great war for enlightenment. The final exhortation declares that the Scottish knight stands not only as a guardian but as a herald of the greater mysteries. His service, his fidelity, and his vigilance prepare him for doctrines and responsibilities yet concealed, truths too lofty to be revealed until the soul has been tempered by the discipline of knighthood. He is assured that if he remains faithful, the path will open, and he will be admitted into the deeper sanctuary where the inner light shines without veil. Thus the Scottish degrees are revealed as both culmination and preparation, the culmination of the lesser mysteries, clothing the initiate in the mantle of guardianship, and the preparation for the greater mysteries, where the highest doctrines of the order will be entrusted to those who have proven themselves true knights of wisdom. Chapter 6. The Lesser Mysteries versus the Greater Mysteries. The distinction between the lesser mysteries and the greater mysteries has always stood at the heart of initiation, from the ancient schools of Eleusis and Samothrace to the hidden currents of philosophy preserved in secret orders. Within the Illuminati, this division is retained and transfigured, binding the initiate to a path of gradual ascent in which the outer circle of discipline and preparation opens at last into the inner sanctuary of truth. To understand this distinction is to grasp the very architecture of the order, for the degrees of novice, minival, minor, major, and the Scottish grades together form the lesser mysteries, while beyond them lie the greater mysteries, guarded by the priest, the regent, the magus, and the king. The initiate who contemplates this division perceives that initiation is not a single event, but a ladder of ascent, each rung leading higher, each stage demanding greater purity and fidelity. The lesser mysteries are concerned with discipline, secrecy, virtue, and the awakening of reason. They prepare the soul by purifying it of ignorance and vanity, binding it with oaths that strengthen fidelity, and clothing it in symbols that awaken reflection. These degrees teach the initiate to govern himself, to master speech and thought, to discern truth from falsehood, and to cultivate vigilance in guarding the light. In them the mysteries are veiled, the symbols are incomplete, and the doctrines are hinted at but not fully declared. Their aim is not to satisfy curiosity, but to cultivate readiness. For just as a temple must be built stone by stone before it may receive the divine image in its sanctuary, so too the soul must be prepared through the lesser mysteries before the inner light of the greater mysteries can be revealed. The greater mysteries, by contrast, are concerned with illumination, doctrine, and the transformation of both the individual and society. Here the initiate receives not only symbols but their interpretation, not only hints but unveiled doctrine. He learns the hidden philosophy that undergirds the order, the vision of human perfectibility, and the plan for the reform of society through reason and virtue. These mysteries reveal the unity toward which the pyramid ascends, the summit where all degrees converge, and the divine pattern by which man is called to be remade. The oaths of the greater mysteries bind not only to secrecy and virtue, but to active labor for the perfection of mankind, consecrating the initiate as a priest of truth and a guardian of illumination. The lesser prepares, the greater fulfills, the lesser disciplines, the greater reveals, the lesser guards, the greater consecrates. The initiate who reflects upon this division is reminded of the ancient Eleusinian mysteries, where the lesser rites purified the candidate through fasting, sacrifice, and symbolic ordeals, while the greater unveiled the vision of the divine and the mysteries of life and death. The Illuminati sought to mirror this pattern, believing that the gradual unveiling of truth was necessary to protect both the candidate and the doctrine itself. For if the greater mysteries were revealed too soon, the unprepared soul would distort them, turning light into darkness, truth into error. But when revealed in their proper order, they crown the labor of the lesser mysteries, showing the initiate that all his discipline, silence, and fidelity were but the preparation for the great revelation of unity and perfection. The symbolism of the pyramid thus takes on its full meaning in the division of the mysteries. The base represents the lesser, broad, and necessary, where many are admitted and tested. The summit represents the greater, narrow, and exalted, where only the faithful few arrive. Between base and summit rises the ladder of degrees, each narrowing the path, each demanding more from the initiate. To stand within the lesser mysteries is to gaze upward, perceiving the summit but not yet entering it. To be admitted into the greater is to ascend to the point of unity, where the scattered multiplicity of the lower stages resolves into the harmony of truth. Thus, the entire path of initiation is revealed as a single ascent from the lesser to the greater, from preparation to fulfillment, from discipline to illumination. The lesser mysteries train the initiate by immersing him in the practices of silence, secrecy, and virtue. He learns to observe himself, to confess his weaknesses, to discipline his impulses, and to build within the soul the foundations of an inner temple. These trials are not ends in themselves, but the means by which the raw stone of the self is hewn and shaped. The oaths of the lesser degrees bind him to fidelity in small things so that he may be trusted with great things later. The ceremonies veil their meanings so that he may practice discernment and learn patience. The lessons are delivered in fragments so that he develops the habit of reflection, piecing together symbols into understanding. This work humbles pride, disciplines curiosity, and awakens reverence. Without such preparation, the mysteries would only inflate vanity or collapse under the weight of misunderstanding. The lesser therefore stand as the purgation of the soul, a baptism into silence that makes possible the later vision of truth. The greater mysteries unveil the doctrines that were hidden within the earlier grades. They reveal that all the symbols of the lesser were not arbitrary but preparatory parables. The novice's silence becomes the prelude to the priest's proclamation of truth. The Minivol's owl of wisdom becomes the emblem of the magus, who sees beyond the night of ignorance. The pyramid shown to the miner is explained by the regent as the very structure of human progress and divine order. The knight's armor is transfigured into the priest's vestment, his sword of reason into the magus word of creation. In this unveiling, the initiate perceives that nothing was wasted, that every trial, every oath, every silence prepared him for this illumination. The greater do not abolish the lesser but fulfill them, as the fruit fulfills the flower, as the day fulfills the dawn. In the greater mysteries, the initiate is told plainly of the mission of the order, no longer cloaked in allegory. It is declared that the purpose is the perfection of mankind through the union of reason and virtue. The doctrines of natural religion, of universal brotherhood, of human perfectibility, and of the harmony of society are unfolded with clarity. He is shown that the order is not a private society, but a microcosm of the world as it ought to be, a pattern to reform the world itself. The pyramid is revealed not only as a chart of degrees but as a blueprint for the reconstruction of society, where ignorance is abolished, superstition overthrown, tyranny defeated, and reason enthroned. In this vision, the initiate perceives the full scope of his labor, not only to perfect himself but to perfect humanity, not only to guard the mysteries but to spread their light discreetly into the world. The distinction between the lesser and greater is also described in terms of light. The lesser are twilight, half revealed, filled with shadows and veils, teaching the initiate to walk carefully, to observe, and to wait. The greater are daylight, unveiling the radiance of truth without disguise, permitting the initiate to see the harmony of all things and the unity behind all symbols. Yet even here the light is measured, for illumination is infinite, and no degree can exhaust its fullness. The greater give clarity where the lesser gave obscurity, certainty where the lesser gave hints, but they too point beyond themselves to the infinite mystery of the divine. Thus the initiate learns that every mystery, however great, is but a step toward the inexhaustible, and that humility must accompany him even in the highest revelations. The ancients spoke of the lesser mysteries as the preparation for death, and of the greater as the vision of immortality. In the Illuminati, this symbolism is retained in spiritual form. The lesser teach the initiate to die to his lower self, to put to silence the voices of vanity, desire, and pride. The greater grant him the vision of the immortal order, the harmony of reason and virtue that endures beyond time. The initiate who has passed through both understands that initiation is the art of dying and the art of living, the death of ignorance and the birth of truth. Thus the division of mysteries is revealed not as an arbitrary structure, but as the rhythm of transformation itself, the perpetual cycle of purgation and illumination that leads the soul from shadow into light. The lesser mysteries, though veiled, carry immense spiritual weight because they cultivate the soil in which the seed of illumination may be planted. The initiate who labors faithfully in these degrees finds that his senses are sharpened, his conscience awakened, and his reason strengthened. He begins to notice patterns in the symbols, correspondences between the emblems of one degree and the teachings of another. This gradual awakening creates a hunger for deeper knowledge, but it also ensures that when the greater mysteries are finally revealed, the initiate is not overwhelmed. For without the grounding of silence, discipline, and virtue, the sudden unveiling of doctrine would blind like lightning in the night, leaving confusion instead of clarity. The lesser are therefore a mercy as much as a test, allowing the candidate to grow into the mysteries rather than stumble beneath their weight. The greater mysteries crown this preparation by opening the inner sanctuary. Here the initiate learns that the order is not a creation of men alone, but the reflection of a higher pattern woven into the cosmos itself. He is taught that the harmony of reason and virtue is not arbitrary, but the very law by which the universe is sustained. The doctrine of perfectibility is no longer presented as aspiration but as destiny, for the soul is shown to be made for unity with truth, just as the pyramid narrows inevitably to its summit. The initiate perceives that the labor of mankind is to rise from multiplicity into unity, from division into harmony, from ignorance into illumination. He understands that his own ascent is a microcosm of the great ascent of humanity, and that his fidelity contributes invisibly to the perfection of the whole. The division between the lesser and greater also functions as a safeguard for the sanctity of the mysteries. The lesser create a boundary, a threshold across which only the faithful may pass. To stop at the lesser is not failure, for even they bestow discipline and wisdom, but to advance into the greater is to receive a consecration that demands lifelong fidelity. The initiate is warned that the greater cannot be betrayed without terrible consequence, for the doctrines revealed are not mere secrets of ceremony but truths whose profanation brings ruin to the soul. Thus the veils of the lesser protect not only the mysteries from the unworthy, but the unworthy from the mysteries. The greater are reserved for those who have proven their fidelity through years of labor, so that revelation is joined to responsibility and illumination to sacrifice. The spiritual rhythm of the two divisions may also be seen in the cycle of initiation itself. The lesser mysteries purify, the greater illuminate, the lesser empty the vessel, the greater fill it. The lesser are the plow that breaks the soil, the greater are the seed and the harvest. The initiate who has passed through both understands that the soul must continually undergo this rhythm, for every new ascent requires new purgation. Even the highest initiate must remain a novice in humility, continually stripping away pride, continually returning to silence, even as he stands in the light of the greater. Thus the division is not merely structural but cyclical, describing the perpetual process of transformation by which the soul is drawn ever deeper into the infinite mystery. The symbolism of temple architecture reinforces this teaching. The outer court corresponds to the lesser mysteries, where many may gather, where sacrifices of purification are offered, and where the first oaths are sworn. The inner sanctuary corresponds to the greater mysteries, where only the consecrated may enter, where the lamp of truth burns without veil, and where the divine presence is encountered. Yet even within the sanctuary there remains the Holy of Holies, veiled to all but the highest, reminding the initiate that beyond every revelation lies a greater mystery still. The initiate learns that the order is but a reflection of this temple, guiding him step by step from the outer court of discipline into the inner sanctuary of illumination, and onward toward the eternal mystery that can never be exhausted. Continue. The lesser mysteries may therefore be seen as the schooling of the senses, while the greater mysteries are the awakening of the spirit. In the early stages, the initiate learns by impressions, symbols to contemplate, oaths to bind him, and duties to form his character. These impressions shape his soul, sharpening discernment, and preparing him for the inner light. But once he is admitted into the greater mysteries, the method changes. No longer is he left only with hints and veils. Now the doctrine is spoken clearly, and the pattern of the universe is unfolded before him. He comes to see that every symbol he encountered in the earlier stages was a fragment of a larger whole, a piece of the cosmic mosaic. What seemed partial and obscure in the lesser becomes luminous and coherent in the greater, for he now sees the unity that binds all things together. This unveiling transforms the initiate's sense of responsibility. In the lesser mysteries, his task was to govern himself, to remain silent, to observe and to endure probation. In the greater, his task is to labor openly, though still discreetly, for the enlightenment of mankind. He is told that the world suffers under the weight of ignorance and superstition, and that it is the duty of the enlightened to act as leaven in the mass, gradually raising society through reason and virtue. The initiate perceives that he has been prepared not only for his own illumination, but for service. To remain within the light without radiating it outward would be betrayal. Illumination is fulfilled only when it becomes a source of transformation for others. Thus, the greater mysteries consecrate him not only as a knower of truth, but as a worker for humanity. The division between the two orders of mystery also guards against the corruption of knowledge. History bears witness to many who grasped fragments of higher wisdom without purification, and who turned them into instruments of pride or tyranny. The Illuminati sought to prevent such distortions by veiling the greater, until the candidate had demonstrated fidelity in the lesser. The lesser demand years of silence, reflection, and discipline, which gradually weaken the roots of vanity and selfishness. Only then, when the soul has been softened and made pliant, can the deeper truths be entrusted without danger. This pedagogy reflects the eternal law that revelation without purification destroys, but purification joined to revelation saves. The initiate thus learns to honor the gradual path, knowing that delay is not denial but protection. The ancient parallels deepen the understanding of this division. At Eleusis, the lesser mysteries were celebrated in the spring, cleansing the candidate with purifications and sacrifices, while the greater were celebrated in the autumn, unveiling the vision of the goddess and the mystery of rebirth. In the Hermetic schools, the lesser were the outer teachings of natural philosophy and morality, while the greater were the inner doctrines of divine union. In every tradition the same pattern appears. First the purgation of the self, then the illumination of the spirit. The Illuminati stand in this lineage, not as imitators but as continuators of the universal pattern of initiation. The candidate who contemplates this tradition perceives that the order is part of a chain stretching through antiquity, linking him to all who have walked the path from the lesser to the greater. In the end, the distinction between the lesser and the greater mysteries reflects the law of proportion in all things. Just as a child must first learn letters before reading, and scales before music, so too the soul must first learn discipline before truth. To invert this order would be to build the roof before the foundation, to pour wine into an unbaked vessel. The initiate who faithfully endures the lesser proves himself worthy of the greater, and in so doing he demonstrates that illumination is not accident but destiny, not gift without labor but harvest after sowing. The two orders of mystery are therefore not opposed but complementary, the two halves of the circle of initiation, without which the path would remain broken and incomplete. The initiate who has reached the threshold between the lesser and greater mysteries often feels a tension within himself, for he has been trained in silence yet longs for speech, disciplined in obedience yet thirsting for freedom, bound by oaths yet yearning for revelation. This tension is itself part of the design, for it purifies desire. The unworthy grow weary and abandon the path, while the faithful transmute their longing into perseverance. In this way, the boundary between the two orders of mystery serves as a crucible, burning away impatience and testing fidelity. The initiate who endures learns that illumination is not given to satisfy curiosity but to crown devotion. The veil is not lifted to those who demand it, but to those who have learned to bow before it in reverence until the appointed time. When at last the greater mysteries are opened, the initiate perceives that the order is not merely a society but a cosmic image. Every degree he has passed through mirrors a stage in the unfolding of the universe and the ascent of the soul. The novice corresponds to the chaos of unformed matter, awaiting order. The minor vowel reflects the first stirring of wisdom in darkness, the owl perceiving faint light in the night. The minor represents the ordering of multiplicity into structure, the pyramid rising from its foundation. The major reflects the construction of the inner temple, where reason becomes a lamp and conscience an altar. The Scottish knight embodies the guardianship of truth, standing as sentinel at the threshold of illumination. Each stage is cosmic as well as personal, and in the greater mysteries this correspondence is unveiled with clarity, showing that the initiate has not merely ascended through ceremonies but has retraced the very steps of creation and return. The doctrines revealed in the greater mysteries declare that man is called to become a conscious co-worker in the divine order. Just as the cosmos is governed by harmony, so must society be ordered in reason and virtue. Just as the soul ascends from multiplicity into unity, so must mankind rise from division into brotherhood. The initiate learns that the perfection of the individual and the perfection of society are inseparable, for a corrupt world hinders the soul, and unpurified souls corrupt the world. Therefore the labor of the order is twofold: to purify the individual through initiation, and to reform society through enlightenment. The initiate perceives that his oaths now bind him not only to silence and fidelity, but to active labor for the world's illumination. This consecration transforms initiation from a private ascent into a public mission, a sacred charge to carry the flame of wisdom into the darkness of the world. The greater mysteries also reveal the secret of unity. The initiate is shown that all religions, philosophies, and traditions, however diverse, are veils of a single truth. Each contains fragments of the eternal wisdom, though often obscured by superstition or corruption. To perceive this unity is to transcend sectarianism and to embrace the brotherhood of all seekers of truth. The initiate learns to honor the outer forms of religion, while discerning their inner essence, to recognize the same light shining through many lamps. This doctrine of unity is the crown of the greater mysteries, reconciling the multiplicity of human belief with the harmony of the divine. The initiate perceives that the order itself is not a sect, but a school, a vessel of the perennial wisdom that flows through all ages, now unveiled to him as his inheritance. Thus the distinction between the lesser and greater mysteries unfolds its full meaning. The lesser discipline the soul, the greater illuminate it. The lesser test fidelity, the greater crown it. The lesser guard the threshold, the greater open the sanctuary. The initiate who has passed through both understands that initiation is not a series of ceremonies but a rhythm of death and rebirth, concealment and revelation, preparation and fulfillment. He learns that the mysteries are not given but lived, not revealed once but continually unveiled as the soul ascends into deeper unity with truth. To stand within the greater is not to have completed the path but to have entered its true beginning, where the work of illumination expands without end, leading from the light of reason into the infinite radiance of the divine. Chapter 7. Doctrinal Commentary and Conclusion. The rituals and degrees of the Illuminati, from the novice to the Scottish knight, have unfolded before the initiate like the steps of a carefully constructed temple. Yet without doctrine, ritual remains a shell, a form awaiting its essence. The doctrinal commentary exists to unveil the inner philosophy of the order, the teachings that give meaning to the oaths, symbols, and ceremonies. It is in this commentary that the initiate learns the vision of man and society which inspired the creation of the Illuminati, and toward which every degree has pointed in veiled language. These doctrines are not inventions of the 18th century alone, but echoes of the perennial philosophy that has coursed through the mysteries of all ages, transposed into a rational key for the enlightenment of the modern world. The central doctrine of the Illuminati is the perfectibility of mankind. This teaching declares that man is not fixed in ignorance and vice, but capable of continual ascent toward wisdom and virtue. Just as the pyramid narrows toward unity, so the human soul may rise step by step toward harmony with the divine order. The imperfections of society, superstition, tyranny, corruption, are not eternal conditions but distortions that can be corrected through education, discipline, and the cultivation of reason. The initiate is told that the destiny of humanity is enlightenment, the gradual unveiling of truth, until all men stand in the light of reason and all societies are ordered in justice. This doctrine crowns all the degrees, for every oath, every symbol, every trial has been designed to awaken the conviction that man is capable of more than he appears, and that illumination is the birthright of the human race. Closely bound to this doctrine is the principle of natural religion. The order teaches that beneath the multiplicity of sects and dogmas lies a universal truth, accessible not by blind faith, but by reason illuminated with reverence. The initiate is instructed to see beyond the divisions of creed and to honor the eternal wisdom shining through them all. This is not to abolish religion but to purify it, stripping away superstition and corruption so that its essence may shine clearly. The God of the Illuminati is not a sectarian deity but the source of truth itself, the eternal light by which reason perceives and virtue acts. In this way the doctrine reconciles philosophy and religion, reason and reverence, teaching that true enlightenment is not irreligion, but the unveiling of the divine order written into both the cosmos and the conscience. The doctrine of secrecy is also given its final interpretation. In the early degrees, secrecy was practiced as discipline, a test of fidelity and self-mastery. In the commentary, it is revealed as a law of nature itself. All things grow in hiddenness before they blossom in public. The seed in the soil, the child in the womb, the thought in the heart. To guard the mysteries is to honor this law, protecting the fragile flame until it is strong enough to shine openly. Secrecy is not concealment for its own sake, but the condition of growth, the vessel in which wisdom matures. The initiate learns that indiscretion is not only betrayal of trust, but violation of the natural rhythm by which all illumination unfolds. Thus, secrecy becomes not a burden but a sacred participation in the law of becoming, teaching patience, reverence, and respect for the sanctity of knowledge. Another doctrine revealed is that of virtue as the measure of illumination. The order insists that knowledge without virtue is worse than ignorance, for it arms vice with power. True illumination is proven not by visions, titles, or ceremonies, but by conduct. The initiate who has mastered himself, who speaks truth, who acts justly, who tempers desire, who labors for the good of others, he alone is illuminated. All else is shadow and pretension. This doctrine humbles the proud and exalts the faithful, teaching that illumination is not the privilege of the few but the duty of all who would live in harmony with truth. The highest initiate and the humblest novice are measured by the same rule, the degree to which virtue has been embodied in life. The doctrinal writings also affirm the principle of liberty, though not the chaotic liberty of unrestrained desire, but the ordered liberty of reason. The initiate is taught that true freedom is not the power to do as one pleases, but the power to live in harmony with truth. A man enslaved to appetite or prejudice is not free, though he boast of independence. Only the man who governs himself by reason is master of his own soul. This inner liberty, when multiplied across society, becomes the foundation of just government, for a nation of virtuous citizens requires no tyrant to restrain it. The Illuminati therefore see the perfection of the individual and the liberation of society as inseparable, each nourishing the other in a cycle of ascent. The initiate perceives that his own labor in secrecy and virtue is not isolated, but contributes invisibly to the emancipation of mankind. From liberty flows the doctrine of equality. The order declares that all men, whatever their station, are capable of illumination, for all bear within themselves the spark of reason. Titles, wealth, and lineage are accidents of fortune, but wisdom and virtue are the true nobility. Within the temple of the mysteries, distinctions of rank are set aside, for every initiate kneels at the same altar, swears the same oath, and is measured by the same law of fidelity. Yet equality is not sameness. Just as the pyramid rises in degrees, so society must recognize gradations of responsibility, with the more illumined guiding the less. But this guidance is not tyranny, for it is founded not on privilege, but on service. The superior in degree is not a master but a shepherd, entrusted with care, not domination. In this balance of equality and hierarchy, the initiate perceives the pattern of a just society, all equal in dignity, each distinct in responsibility, all united in the pursuit of truth. Another doctrine concerns the education of mankind. The order teaches that ignorance is the root of vice and tyranny, and that the surest remedy is the enlightenment of the people. Yet this education cannot be forced, for wisdom imposed without preparation only breeds rebellion or distortion. It must be gradual, adapted to the capacity of each. Just as initiation unfolds degree by degree, the initiate learns that his labor is not to cast pearls before swine, nor to hoard treasures for himself, but to sow seeds of reason wherever the soil is prepared. A single word spoken in season, a single example of virtue lived faithfully, can enlighten more surely than volumes of disputation. Thus the education of mankind is revealed not as a program of indoctrination but as a leavening influence, subtle yet transformative, spreading light silently through the fabric of society until the whole is raised. The commentary also addresses the doctrine of human destiny. The initiate is told that mankind is not condemned to perpetual darkness, but that history itself is the slow unveiling of illumination. Every age has its guardians of wisdom, its initiates who preserved the flame against the winds of ignorance. The order now stands as heir to this lineage, called to carry the light forward into the modern world. Though the task is immense and the resistance of darkness strong, the initiate is assured that truth is invincible, for it is rooted in the eternal order of the cosmos. To serve truth is therefore to align oneself with inevitability, to participate in the triumph that time itself will grant. This vision fills the initiate with hope, teaching that his labor, though hidden and humble, is part of the great unfolding of human destiny toward illumination. The doctrinal core of the order therefore unites philosophy, morality, and esotericism into a single whole. It teaches that man is perfectible, that reason and virtue are the twin pillars of illumination, that secrecy is the vessel of growth, that liberty and equality are the fruits of virtue, that education is the path of enlightenment, and that destiny itself bends toward truth. These doctrines, though rational in form, are spiritual in essence, for they reveal that the light pursued by philosophers is the same light revered by the mystics, the eternal flame by which the cosmos lives and the soul ascends. To embrace them is to see that the mysteries are not arbitrary inventions but reflections of eternal laws, written into nature and conscience alike. The doctrinal commentary further reveals that the order conceives of itself as a living image of the ideal society it seeks to build. Its hierarchy of degrees is not arbitrary, but a reflection of the cosmic ladder of ascent. Its oaths are not mere promises but bonds that mirror the harmony of the universe. Its secrecy is not isolation but communion with the eternal law of growth. In miniature, the order embodies the world as it ought to be, a brotherhood governed by reason, ordered in virtue, consecrated to truth. The initiate who contemplates this realizes that every meeting, every ritual, every silence is itself a rehearsal for the perfected society. Within the temple he sees the future of mankind prefigured, and in his fidelity he participates in its gradual realization. Thus the order becomes for him both school and prophecy, training ground and foretaste of the age of illumination to come. The doctrine of progress is also affirmed. The initiate is told that truth is not static but unfolds, that each age contributes to the unveiling of the eternal wisdom. What the ancients veiled in myth, the moderns seek to express in reason. What was hidden in allegory is now declared in philosophy. Yet this progress does not abolish the past but fulfills it, as the fruit fulfills the seed. The mysteries of Egypt, Greece, and the East are not dismissed but honored as earlier veils of the same light, now made clearer. The initiate learns that he is part of this unfolding, inheriting the wisdom of the past and transmitting it, refined, to the future. This doctrine guards him against arrogance, teaching that he is neither the beginning nor the end but a link in the eternal chain of seekers. A further doctrine concerns the unity of knowledge and virtue. The order teaches that wisdom without morality is barren, and morality without wisdom is blind. The initiate is reminded that the philosophers who speculated without virtue often fell into error, while those who pursued virtue without knowledge often fell into superstition. True illumination unites both, harmonizing the light of reason with the discipline of conduct. In this union, the initiate perceives the image of man perfected, no longer divided between thought and action, but whole, radiant, and free. He understands that the degrees he has passed were designed to weave together these two strands, first disciplining conduct, then awakening understanding, until both are bound in a single fabric of illumination. The commentary also clarifies the role of symbolism. The initiate is told that symbols are not arbitrary decorations but vessels of wisdom, capable of conveying truths that words cannot capture. The pyramid, the owl, the sword, the altar, each is a window into the eternal. To meditate upon them is to open the soul to realities beyond the reach of reason alone. Yet symbols require discernment, for without interpretation they remain opaque. The lesser mysteries gave the symbols, the greater give their keys. In this unveiling, the initiate perceives the harmony of all emblems, discovering that they point to the same truths in diverse forms. He learns to read the world itself as a book of symbols, every star, every law of nature, every event of history speaking in the language of the mysteries. Thus the doctrine of symbolism expands his vision, making all creation a temple of illumination. Above all, the doctrinal commentary impresses the initiate with the seriousness of his vocation. To be an Illuminatus is not to belong to a secret club or to possess hidden curiosities, but to be consecrated to the highest labor of mankind, the perfection of self and the enlightenment of the world. His life is no longer his own, but belongs to truth. His words, thoughts, and deeds are measured against eternity. Every oath he has sworn binds him to this mission, and every symbol he has received reminds him of its weight. The initiate realizes that illumination is not pastime but destiny, not entertainment but sacrifice. With this awareness, he perceives that his entire existence must be ordered toward the mysteries, that he himself must become a living temple, a knight of wisdom, a guardian of the eternal light. The doctrinal core also discloses the esoteric principle of harmony, which the order places at the center of its philosophy. Harmony is not mere balance between opposites, but the law that binds all things together in proportion and unity. The initiate learns that reason and virtue, liberty and obedience, equality and hierarchy, secrecy and revelation, are not contradictions but pairs of opposites reconciled in harmony. The pyramid itself is the emblem of this law, rising in measured proportion, each stone bearing its weight in order and symmetry. To live in harmony is to mirror the cosmos, where stars, elements, and spirits all move according to divine measure. Thus, the initiate is taught that illumination is nothing other than the discovery of harmony within himself and the extension of that harmony into society. Discord in the soul breeds discord in the world. Harmony within becomes harmony without. The doctrine of history is also unfolded. The order interprets human history as the struggle between light and darkness, between reason and superstition, virtue and corruption. Every age, the initiate is told, has witnessed the rise of guardians who sought to defend wisdom against ignorance, from the sages of antiquity to the philosophers of modern times. Yet every age has also seen betrayal, where vanity or tyranny extinguished the flame. The Illuminati place themselves consciously within this drama, not as inventors of light but as heirs and protectors of it. To join the order is therefore to step into the current of history, to take one's place in the eternal conflict between illumination and ignorance. The initiate perceives that his fidelity or betrayal is not trivial, but echoes in the great narrative of mankind, either contributing to the advance of light or aiding its eclipse. The commentary further addresses the role of death in the mysteries. The lesser prepared the initiate for death by teaching him to silence his passions, to die to vanity, and to endure the obscurity of waiting. The greater unveiled death as transformation, the passage of the soul from darkness into light, from multiplicity into unity. The initiate is told that every degree is itself a rehearsal for death, every oath a dying to the profane, every illumination a rebirth into the sacred. He learns that the fear of death is but ignorance, for the soul's destiny is not annihilation but perfection. To live illuminated is to die daily, and to die illuminated is to live eternally. Thus the mysteries reconcile him to mortality, teaching that death itself is the final initiation, the veil through which the soul passes into the eternal sanctuary. The doctrine of unity is restated in its highest form. The initiate is shown that the apparent multiplicity of truths, sects, and philosophies all point to the one eternal light. The order insists that it does not abolish the distinctions of culture or creed, but reveals their hidden root in unity. Just as the many stones of the pyramid converge into a single summit, so the many traditions of mankind converge into a single truth. The initiate is exhorted to see beyond the veils of difference, to honor all who seek wisdom, and to labor for the reconciliation of mankind in the harmony of reason and virtue. This unity is not imposed by force but discovered in illumination, for once the light shines clearly, division dissolves of itself. In this doctrinal vision, the initiate finds the culmination of his long labor. He perceives that every silence kept, every oath sworn, every symbol contemplated, every trial endured, were fragments of a single teaching, that man is capable of perfection, that society can be reformed in harmony, and that truth is one. He realizes that illumination is not a secret hoard of knowledge, but a way of life, a continual ascent, a participation in the eternal order of the cosmos. The commentary crowns the rituals with doctrine, giving form to the spirit that animated them, and in so doing it transforms the initiate from a seeker of symbols into a guardian of truth. His journey in the lesser is complete, his vocation in the greater is begun. The doctrinal commentary reaches its climax in the teaching of service. The initiate is told with solemnity that illumination, if hoarded for oneself, withers into pride, but if given in service, multiplies like light reflected in countless mirrors. He learns that the true measure of an initiate is not the mysteries he has received, but the virtues he has imparted. not the symbols he holds, but the lives he touches with their meaning. The order insists that secrecy does not mean isolation, but a wise channeling of wisdom into the world without betrayal. The initiate is to serve silently, to plant seeds without demanding harvest, to kindle lamps without boasting of their flame. In this, he imitates the eternal light itself, which shines without proclamation, sustains without demanding recognition, and illumines all without distinction. Closely tied to service is the doctrine of sacrifice. The initiate is warned that fidelity will demand cost, the surrender of ambition, the renunciation of vanity, the bearing of misunderstanding or hostility from the world. He is reminded that every true guardian of wisdom has walked this path, offering his peace, his reputation, even his life for the sake of truth. Sacrifice is not punishment but consecration, the act by which the soul declares that truth is dearer than all else. In accepting this law, the initiate ceases to fear loss, for he sees that all given to truth is transmuted into eternal gain. His life becomes a continual offering upon the altar of wisdom, each act of fidelity a flame rising upward into the invisible temple. The doctrine of fraternity is also brought into its highest form. In the early degrees, fraternity was the fellowship of seekers bound by oaths. In the doctrinal commentary, it becomes the reflection of cosmic unity itself. The initiate is told that every brother is not only a companion but a fragment of the same light, a stone of the same pyramid, a note of the same harmony. To betray a brother is therefore to wound oneself. To serve a brother is to serve truth itself. The initiate perceives that his fidelity to his brethren is not sentiment but metaphysics, the recognition that the many are one. This doctrine transforms the bonds of the order into sacred ties, consecrating fraternity as the earthly image of the unity that crowns the mysteries. The commentary also discloses the esoteric meaning of enlightenment as transformation. Enlightenment is not merely the acquisition of ideas but the transfiguration of the entire being. The initiate is told that his body must become the temple, his mind the lamp, his heart the altar, his will the flame. When these are harmonized, the soul becomes a living sanctuary where the eternal light dwells. This is the true goal of initiation, not to possess symbols or doctrines, but to become illumination itself. The initiate who embodies this doctrine radiates silently, teaching more by presence than by words, guiding others not by compulsion, but by the quiet force of a life aligned with truth. At last, the doctrinal commentary draws all threads together in the vision of the perfect society. It declares that the mission of the order is to plant the seeds of this society by perfecting individuals who will leaven the whole. This society is not utopia imposed by force, but harmony grown from within, founded on reason, sustained by virtue, crowned by unity. Its law is truth, its power is conscience, its aim is the perfection of mankind. The initiate, beholding this vision, understands that his fidelity is part of a cosmic labor, that his oaths bind him not only to his brethren but to the future of humanity. Thus the doctrines crown his journey with purpose, revealing that the mysteries are not idle ceremonies but the architecture of a new world, built stone by stone in the soul and in society alike. The closing sections of the doctrinal commentary impress upon the initiate the unbroken continuity of the mysteries across ages. He is told that the truths he has received are not inventions of a single man or century, but fragments of a perennial wisdom, renewed in every age according to the needs of mankind. The schools of Pythagoras, the temples of Egypt, the rites of Eleusis, the visions of the Hermetists, the philosophies of the Stoics, the orders of knighthood, all are seen as earlier veils of the same light that the Illuminati now preserve and transmit. By perceiving this continuity, the initiate recognizes that he has entered not merely a society but a lineage stretching back into the dawn of history, uniting him invisibly with all who have ever labored for illumination. His oaths thus bind him to eternity itself, making his fidelity part of an unbroken chain of guardianship. The initiate is then reminded of the principle of moderation, which governs the application of all doctrines. He is warned that zeal without prudence can destroy, just as indifference without fidelity can betray. The mysteries must never be forced upon the unprepared, nor concealed from the worthy. The initiate must learn to read the signs of readiness in others, to give in proportion to capacity, to guide without compulsion, to enlighten without arrogance. This moderation is itself an image of harmony, balancing light and shadow, revelation and concealment, patience and action. Through it, the initiate learns to act as a wise steward of truth, preserving its sanctity while planting its seeds with discretion. In its final passages, the commentary turns to contemplation of the divine. The initiate is told that all his labor, silence, secrecy, discipline, virtue, service, is ordered toward one end: union with the eternal source of truth. This union is not to be understood as absorption into abstraction, but as the soul's harmony with the divine order, the alignment of reason and will with the law of the cosmos. To live in this union is illumination itself, a state of freedom, serenity, and joy, where every act reflects the eternal. The initiate perceives that all doctrines, all symbols, all rituals point to this single truth, that man is destined to become a conscious reflection of the divine, a living temple of light. Here the commentary reaches its conclusion, reminding the initiate that his journey is not finished but transformed. What began as probation in the novice and deepened through silence, discipline, and guardianship in the Scottish knight, now flowers into vision and mission in the doctrines. The initiate sees that initiation is not a single passage but a lifelong ascent, not the possession of secrets but the continual embodiment of truth. He stands now as a guardian of wisdom, a laborer for mankind, a servant of the eternal. The mysteries have revealed their essence, and he knows that fidelity to them is fidelity to his own highest nature. In this way, the doctrinal commentary closes the circle of initiation. The initiate, once a seeker standing in darkness, has been led through silence into speech, through discipline into freedom, through symbols into truth. He is now consecrated to carry the flame of illumination into the world, to guard it in secrecy, to radiate it in service, and to embody it in virtue. And as he contemplates his vows, his brethren, and his destiny, he perceives the great unity that all mysteries, lesser and greater alike, are but reflections of the eternal light, and that his life henceforth must be nothing less than its mirror. The journey of initiation through the degrees of the Illuminati reveals itself not as a sequence of arbitrary rites, but as a coherent path of transformation. Beginning with the novice, the candidate was plunged into silence, learning to guard his tongue and to observe himself with honesty. As a minival, he entered the circle of seekers beneath the owl of wisdom, practicing vigilance and fellowship. As Illuminatus minor, he beheld the pyramid of ascent, binding his speech to will and his will to truth through oaths of fidelity. As Illuminatus major, he discovered the inner temple, realizing that illumination is built within the soul through discipline and service. As Scottish novice and knight, he donned the armor of virtue and the sword of reason, consecrated as a guardian of wisdom and a sentinel of truth. Each step was preparation for the next, each veil a teacher, each symbol a fragment of the greater whole. In the doctrinal commentary, these fragments converge into a vision: the doctrines of perfectibility, natural religion, secrecy, virtue, liberty, equality, education, harmony, and unity reveal themselves as the inner essence of all the degrees. The initiate comes to see that initiation is not about possessing secrets, but about embodying truth. It is not the ceremonies that illuminate, but the fidelity, silence, and virtue cultivated through them. He learns that the mysteries are not confined to ritual chambers, but extend into the world, into every act of justice, every word of truth, every gesture of compassion. The order is revealed, not only as a society but as a mirror of the world to come, a prophecy of a humanity perfected by reason and bound together in fraternity. Thus the initiate's path closes, not with finality, but with beginning, for the mysteries are inexhaustible, and every illumination unveils a greater light beyond. The doctrines he now holds are not the end of wisdom but its foundation, calling him to continual ascent. His fidelity must endure, his silence must deepen, his service must widen, his virtue must grow. He stands now as a guardian in the chain of history, entrusted with the eternal flame, bound to preserve it in secrecy and to spread it in service. The conclusion of his initiation is the commencement of his vocation, to live as illumination itself, a temple of harmony, a knight of truth, a servant of mankind, and a child of the eternal light.